Okay, Mrs. Thomas, if you could start the recording, please. Good evening. I'd like to call the May 19th meeting, May 19, 2021 meeting of the University Heights City Council to order. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Here.
Mrs. Berry?
Here.
Mrs. Pardee? Mrs. Weiss?
Here.
Mr. Ertl? Mr. Rock?
Here.
Mr. Gould?
Here.
And I see Mr. Ertl signing on. Mr. Ertl?
Yes, ma'am.
Present?
Yes.
Very good. Will all those who are able please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
We need to excuse Mrs. Pardee.
Oh, excuse me. Yes. Is there a motion to excuse Mrs. Pardee?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Blankfeld, second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Will all those who are able please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Spoke with Mrs. Thomas and the law director. There seems to be a discrepancy over Resolution 2021-14. I would ask that the council table the minutes till the next meeting so that we can get to the bottom of the discrepancy. Is there a motion to table?
So moved.
Very good. Motion to table by Mr. Ertl. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is comments from the audience. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes with a total time allowed of 15 minutes per meeting unless otherwise permitted by Council Ordinance 91-25. Is there anyone here this evening who would care to address the city? So please raise your hand. Just want to make sure that I'm not missing anybody. Is there anybody who cares to address the city this evening? Okay, well, if not, oh no, I see a hand now. No, I'm sorry. That was my cursor. Okay. All right. One last call because I want to make sure I don't miss anybody. Is there anybody here who is looking to address the city this evening as a comment from the audience? All right. Seeing none, we will move on then to the reports and communications from the mayor and the taking of action. I have excellent news to report tonight, news that all of council and all residents of University Heights should be happy to hear. But first, a quick look back. When this administration took office at the beginning of 2018, we discovered the finance department was in shambles. Proper books had not been kept. No bank reconciliations had been done in over a year, not since 2016. I provided the finance staff that I inherited from the previous administration the direction and opportunity to rectify the situation. When they did not deliver or even make meaningful progress, I replaced them all in spring of 2018. With new finance staff, the first order of business was to recreate, or indeed create, books so that the city could be audited. It was evident from our first meeting with the auditors in early 2018 that we had nothing to give them for 2017, and that the city was at risk of being declared unauditable. That was a black eye we sought to avoid. We took 2 extensions and constructed books that passed an audit and avoided that embarrassment. All the while, we made changes throughout city government in 2018. Among them, we planned and then transitioned to a new accounting system.
What?
We began- Mrs. Tom, thank you. We began implementing best practices in finance, and that brings us up to 2019. The year 2019 represents the first full year where this administration had our personnel in from day one, and where some of the best practices we had implemented thus far were in place. Accordingly, the 2019 audit represents the first audit of the City of University Heights that is a complete statement of the current administration's work in reforming the finance department. I turn now to the state auditor's audit of the City of University Heights for the year ending December 31st, 2019. It is now on our city's website, having been released by the state auditor since our last council meeting. While the city has used James G. Zupka CPA Inc. for audits in the past, and will again in the future, the city was due to have an audit done in-house by the state of Ohio. That was this audit. And due to COVID-19, the state auditors took additional time. And now it can be told. The 2019 University Heights audit is a clean audit. Overall, the state auditor found that the financial position of the city is fairly represented in its financial statements. The auditors found no issues that would cloud the judgment or veracity of the information contained in the city's financial statements. Items noted in prior years were corrected in 2019. That process of improvement continued in 2020, and it continues now in 2021. Let me tell you about the exit conference we had with the state auditor on this audit. We did not have one. The state auditor offered to waive the exit conference, and we agreed and waived the exit conference. There were no material issues to discuss. It is important for the community to know that I take the stewardship of the public finances very seriously. This is the people's money. By taking care of it and using it prudently, we can deliver the high-quality services our residents expect and deserve. With this audit, the auditors have confirmed that the city and this administration continue to make progress and continue to improve controls through formal policies, practices, and procedures. A few examples. Instead of calling a carryover balance a surplus, we implemented the city's first reserve policy, and we follow it. We revised a long outdated investment policy, opening up new and secure methods for investing public money. We implemented an updated fixed asset policy. We created a facilities improvement fund with some initial funding, and with that obtained approval of the administration's facilities needs assessment study now underway. We have completely rewritten the Personnel and Policy Manual, which had a first reading at the last council meeting and will be back in a future meeting. We implemented a payroll stabilization fund. So years from now, when there are 27 instead of 26 paydays in 1 year, like there was in 2020, it won't be the same budgetary hit to the city as it was last year. Most of us won't even be working here the next time that happens, but we nevertheless are looking out for the future. We are submitting tonight revised petty cash change fund policies for the pool, police department, and building department. This is not an exhaustive list. Over the next few weeks, there will be even more. Finance is the lifeblood of any organization. It enables us to do all the good things people expect. Without good finance, all the good work we otherwise would seek to do would be impeded. Good finance is not merely an end to itself, but is a means to the greater end of delivering high-quality services to our residents and building the community we envision. It is mid-May, and last week, our Finance Director, Dennis Kennedy, provided every member of council financial statements through the end of April. Yesterday, he followed that up with a written summary of those statements. We have come so far from the days when the prior administration did not provide financial statements to council for a year. We all thought they were being evasive and secretive and non-transparent, when really they couldn't report on where the city was financially because they didn't know either. It seems that they were scared to spend money because they didn't have a handle on what the city actually had. They would feign poverty and then magically discover and declare a surplus at the end of the year, when in fact they hadn't paid the bills and they hadn't made necessary investments. They deferred necessary expenditures, even authorized ones, and abandoned maintenance. When you cannot handle the present, you cannot even plan for the future. This administration, our administration, has a handle on the money. We understand where we are and where we can go and where we need to go. And that is why we are leading the way and why the administration is planning for the future. It all starts with finance. Now it can be told, we did it in 2019. Clean audit confirmed. We continued this work in 2020. We are doing this work now this year, and we will do this work next year and in the years to come. With the security and stability, guidance and professionalism this administration provides in finance, maybe together we will have the courage to make the best decisions this city and its residents deserve. I look forward to that day. Thank you to Finance Director Dennis Kennedy and all the dedicated professionals in the finance department that helped make this successful and clean audit possible. Thank you for a job well done and for excellent service to the residents of University Heights. Speaking of professionalism and excellent service, I turn now. It is my pleasure to introduce to the community tonight our new Housing and Community Development Director, Jeff Engelbrecht. Mr. Engelbrecht is most recently of the Cleveland Housing Court, where he was a housing specialist. He worked on hundreds of criminal cases regarding both minor and first-degree misdemeanors for housing, building, and zoning code violations. Much of his work involved properties in derelict condition and efforts to encourage property owners to bring their properties into compliance. Mr. Engelbrecht was also a lead community organizer for ESOP, Empowering and Strengthening Ohio's People, where he led a grassroots coalition that persuaded the city of Cleveland to demolish over 50 derelict properties in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood, and where he led efforts against slumlords, resulting in property cleanups, repairs, and payments owed on capious warrants. His community development work includes his time with the Northeast Shores Development Corporation, which focused on projects in North Collinwood, including a public art project and the early work towards reconstruction of the Euclid Beach Fishing Pier. And if you haven't seen it, it's amazing. In the 2 weeks that he has been here, Mr. Engelbrecht has hit the ground running, some of which council members already know from their email, much of which will be set forth in his report later this evening, as well as in Agenda Item D tonight. Housing and community development was central to this administration's priorities and initiatives in 2018 and 2019. We even created a new department to emphasize and prioritize addressing the issues of our aging housing stock. This all took a backseat to public safety during the pandemic. And today, this priority is back up front where it belongs. Safe, secure housing is essential. We have programs that meet people where they are at all levels, from the citywide community reinvestment area we established to our longstanding partnership with the Cleveland Restoration Society and its Heritage Home Program to the Property Maintenance Grant Program that we started in 2019. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Engelbrecht to the city of University Heights.
Thank you, Mayor.
On Memorial Day, we will hold a commemoration ceremony at 10 a.m. at Walter Stinson Community Park. Since we have postponed the parade until July 4th, we have moved to the location and time of the Memorial Day commemoration. The good news is we are nevertheless having an event to honor those lost in service to our country. All members of City Council are invited to participate in the commemoration and in the traditional flag ceremony. No excuse is necessary if you do not yet feel comfortable participating in an in-person public event. Please just let us know either way. If all members would RSVP by emailing info@universityheights.com. There are 6 flags in the flag ceremony. If all 7 council members are able to attend and do attend, then the vice mayor will lead the pledge, as she has, while the other 6 place the flags. Our featured speaker this Memorial Day will be retired commander and Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame inductee, Rick DeShant. Rick currently serves as the executive director of the Northeast Ohio Foundation for Patriotism and has over 40 years of experience in military, public, and government affairs, as well as strategic planning, crisis management, and donor development. DeShant attended college at John Carroll University and served our country for a total of 21 years in the Coast Guard Reserve, with combat tours in the Middle East for the First Gulf War, in Haiti in 1994, and again in Iraq and Kuwait for Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003 and 2004. In addition to his service in the Coast Guard, Rick has also served at the Department of Homeland Security as its Assistant Federal Security Director for Operations in Northeast Ohio. This year's Memorial Day commemoration ceremony will be especially bittersweet, as it will be our first since the passing of Pete Bernardo. Tonight, we will be honoring Pete Bernardo by resolution, item C on the agenda. For over 30 years, Pete has helped plan and coordinate the parade and commemoration ceremony. This year's Memorial Day commemoration is dedicated to the memory of Pete Bernardo. We will honor him and hold him especially in our hearts for his service and dedication to our city and to our country. Thank you, Pete, for everything. This concludes my report. Turning now to the agenda. Item A, motion authorizing entering into financing proposal with FNB Commercial Leasing for the payment of expenses related to the approved procurement of a new refuse truck and new dump truck. Mr. Kennedy, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. In the original council packet, we had a proposal that was received from FNB, and that was quoted to support a total payment obligation, or I should say our financing of $407,909. That was originally quoted as at a rate of 2.45%. Subsequent to the time when we sent the packet out to council, we were able to have a discussion with FNB representatives, and that rate came down to under 2%. And I did send a notice out to Kelly. The rate is actually 1.96%. Calls for 6 semi-annual payments and arrears of $70,335.69. And really the idea of this is to spread those capital costs over a couple of years until we get a better handle on where we're at with COVID and some of the repercussions of that. I think the financing rate is spectacular. I just wanted to bring it to council's attention to see if we could, by motion, authorize the city to enter into this commercial leasing agreement. I have Mr. Stephen Holmes here from First National Bank. He'd be happy to answer any questions, as would I, from anybody on council. The two trucks, the Packer, the refuse packer, and the dump truck were both previously approved by council at a meeting in April. So I'd be happy, either myself or Mr. Holmes, to take any questions that anybody may have.
Well, before we yield to questions, Mr. Holmes, is there anything you'd like to say with respect to the proposal, just as a matter of introductory comments?
Well, absolutely, Mayor. Brennan, thank you for that. Members of council, and of course, Director Kennedy. He was being very modest in terms of how the rate came down. If you know, Dennis, I have whelps on my back right now in terms of getting that rate down. But Dennis and I have known each other for too many years. It goes back to, if you know his resume, when he was actually the director of the Ohio Lottery. And so I've kind of followed him around for over 25 years in at his multiple positions. And Mayor, I certainly concur in terms of his ability And it doesn't surprise me that he got the city's finances in order, or I should say in short order. He got them in shape. So it's just a pleasure to address you all. I have been in the business, like I said, for over 30 years, 25 of which was with a bank called First Merit Bank. That was out of Akron, was acquired by Huntington. And when that happened, I found my way to First National Bank. First National Bank is headquartered out of Pittsburgh. I'm a Cleveland native, so that did bother me, but they're good people there nonetheless. It's a bank that has over 30 billion in assets, 4,000 employees in over 7 states. Very substantial. I was pleased to accept a position, or offered and then accept a position of manager of public finance. It is really my charge to grow our relationships with public entities throughout the state of Ohio and in Western PA. So I just appreciate this opportunity to reacquaint myself with the city of University Heights. And I'm glad I'm doing so when all of your finances are now in order. So thank you for that. We continue to offer services, traditional banking services, as well as note and bond financing, as well as leasing. The leasing comes through our commercial lease division, and I think Mike Gardner, our commercial leasing manager, is also on the phone. Mike, are you there?
I am, Seth. Thank you.
So Mike must be in his golf attire since he didn't want to put his video up. But we are here to answer any questions that you have, and we honestly and sincerely appreciate this opportunity to be of service to the city of University Heights.
Well, thank you, Mr. Holmes, and thank you, Mr. Gardner. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Holmes, or Mr. Gardner? Is there a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Erdl to authorize entering into a financing proposal with FNB Commercial Leasing for the payment of expenses related to the approved procurement of a new refuse truck and a new dump truck. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Yeah, very good. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Thank you, Mr. Gardner, for being here this evening. We are a public meeting. You're welcome to stay, but we certainly don't expect you to. So have a good evening. We will
Thank
now
you.
move.
Mayor,
And thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Yes, Mr. McConville.
I'm sorry, but before you move on to item 2, if you could just note that in the title of that ordinance, that the codified ordinance section being referenced is 243.07.
That like the one that you sent out.
Correct.
I'll just read the one off of here.
Very good.
Okay, very good. Okay. So item B, an ordinance amending ordinance 2005-27 and ordinance 2018-70, amending section 243.07 entitled Petty Cash Fund and creating a petty cash / change fund policy for city departments and declaring an emergency. Mr. Kennedy.
Thanks, Mayor. Just kind of by accident this year, since pool was not open last year, we had a situation where we're looking to give them some startup monies to get things going in terms of not only people that will come up for some kind of cash purchases for memberships, but also just routine purchases for candy and food items that they sell at the pool. In doing so, I didn't find any previous legislation that allowed for the creation of a change fund. There is a petty cash fund currently authorized both in building and housing. I'm proposing to consolidate that into one change fund for $200. and establishing a change fund and a petty cash fund in the police department, each for $150 each. I've put together a brief policy that governs how those monies will be managed. The difference between a petty cash fund and a change fund. Change funds are used strictly to make change for consumers that are coming in to make payments on things. And in terms of cash payments, we need to have the ability to break bills, or in some cases, make change for people. The petty cash fund is, for the police department, is $150. That will cover some small items that continually we find ourselves writing vouchers for that really cost more than the price of the voucher. That would be, reimbursement for a parking expense for somebody to go downtown to go to court, some other nominal purchases needed under emergency for anything related to care of any prisoners or people that are detained. So I wanted to formalize that process for the police department. This policy will do so. And I believe Mr. McConville's ordinance, it refers to the other two that I found that were codified, 242.06 and 243.07. So I'd ask council to approve this tonight if they would, just so I can have the ability to get the recreation folks the appropriate amount of change they've requested for the startup next week.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Are there any questions for Mr. Kennedy? Any comments? Mrs. Weiss?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just had a question. I noticed like service, administration, fire doesn't have any type of petty cash. Do they never request that? Is that something we should consider?
That's something, Mrs. Weiss, I will probably consider. I want to get this one together based on what is happening currently. The police department had a petty cash fund, but there really isn't any formalized policy that governs that. So I wanted to take care of what we needed right now, but we will most certainly go back and look to see if somebody in finance or, as you said, service or fire would need it. We're trying to move a lot of those expenses online, and hope to do that more and more with some of the permits, but I'll take a look at it after we get this implemented.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Are there any further questions or comments?
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Gould.
just a question about the amendment portion of this. Certainly I appreciate Dennis's ability to manage, a petty cash fund. I just wanted to understand the section that allows the finance director to make amendments to the policy. Is that intended? And then I guess those amendments would need to be presented to council on an annual basis. Does that authority, would that allow the finance director simply to create a petty cash fund for the administration to raise the amounts, the procedures as need be? I just want to understand what we're authorizing in terms of those amendments. They didn't seem to be limited, and I just wanted to understand that better.
Okay.
Address it. This is basically the same language that I and others have used, particularly in the other cities I've been there. I do not plan on doing anything that the council would not be aware of in terms of adding other departments to it, or certainly increasing the amount of monies that are designated for petty cash or change. I believe that sentence is really in there in the event something happens on a unforeseen basis and I need to sign off on something, as opposed to having to go backwards and redo something. These are all, again, very small amounts, but that's in there just for efficiency purposes. It would probably be maybe even more so relied upon if the COVID pandemic restrictions would come back into play. Hopefully they won't, but I certainly can tell the council that any changes to the ordinance that would be approved tonight, I will bring back regardless how minor they are.
So I guess, Luke, would this allow a future finance director or a future administration to make changes to the petty cash fund such that amounts could be raised, departments could be added, policies could be changed as to how that money's spent?
My interpretation, Justin, is that in order for any amounts to be raised, the administration would need to come back to council for authorization.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And again, Dennis, this is not about you, but we just
No,
got
no,
done outlining the issues we've had in your department previously. And if we were to ever return to a situation like that, I wouldn't want to find a place where, but by the way, the finance director raised the petty cash limit to, $25,000 and someone took advantage of that. So, okay, perfect. Thanks so much for that clarification. I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Any further questions or comments about the proposed ordinance? And if not, is there a motion to adopt it on emergency?
So moved on emergency.
Very good. We have a motion to adopt the ordinance on emergency by Mrs. Weiss. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I'll take the second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll first on the suspension of the rules?
Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Aye.
And then on the main motion,
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
very good, motion carries. Thank you. Next is item C, Resolution 2021-18, a resolution in honor of the life of Peter Pete Bernardo, which I will read in full. Whereas Peter Pete Bernardo was a 1967, 1972, and 2017 John Carroll University graduate, a lifelong servant and ambassador for his country and community, the beloved husband of Joanne and father of 3 sons, Peter, Michael, and Matthew. And whereas Pete Bernardo was a respected and much loved resident of University Heights. And whereas Pete Bernardo passed away on May 14th, 2021 at the age of 75. And whereas Pete Bernardo was a decorated Vietnam War veteran, the recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross and 3 Purple Hearts for his heroic efforts in the line of duty for the U.S. Army. And whereas after a distinguished 20-year military career, Pete Bernardo served in a variety of roles at JCU, including Director of Alumni Relations from 1988 to 1997, Director of Advancement Services from 1998 to 2000, and Director of Planned Giving 2001 to 2007, and Senior Director of Philanthropic Relations. And whereas Pete Bernardo was the University Heights Citizen of the Year in 2002, and served as the University Heights Memorial Day Parade Marshal in 2003. And whereas Pete Bernardo served on the University Heights City Council from December 17, 2007 through December 31st, 2009, and for over 30 years helped coordinate and organize the University Heights Memorial Day Parade and Memorial Day Ceremony. And now therefore be it resolved by the Mayor and Council of the City of University Heights, Ohio, that Section 1, the City of University Heights hereby acknowledges the tremendous life accomplishments and contributions of Peter Pete Bernardo, as well as his valor in military service to the United States of America and the legacy he leaves behind. Section 2, it is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of the council concerning and relating to the passage of this resolution were adopted in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and any of its committees that resulted in such formal action were in meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements. Section 3, this resolution shall take effect upon passage by a majority of members of council and the signature of the mayor, otherwise at the earliest time allowed by law. Is there any discussion, questions, or a motion anyone would care to make at this time?
Mayor, I'll move that we pass this resolution. Mr. Bernardo was a genuinely kind and gracious and remarkable man. It's a great loss. A bright light has gone out.
Thank you.
Great.
Motion made by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
Mayor, I'll second the motion as you've outlined, and as we saw this weekend, even one of the brightest portions of University Heights is the citizens that live here and the service that they render to the city. I thought about that a lot this weekend with the crew over at the Walt doing the improvements there. I think that too is a way of acknowledging the legacy of Mr. Bernardo. So I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gould. So second by Mr. Gould. I'll take a moment to thank Mrs. Thomas for her assistance in drafting tonight's resolution in honor of Mr. Bernardo. Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
Are there any further discussion? If there is none, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Next item is item D. Motion requesting permission to seek funding for the demolition of 3621 East Scarborough through the Cuyahoga County Land Reutilization Corporation. Property was deemed a nuisance by City Council on December 16, 2019. Mr. Engelbrecht, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, it's great to see you guys in person, even though it's virtually. Regarding this particular property, 3621 East Scarborough, the property is a large vacant single-family dwelling on East Scarborough, located 3 parcels from the corner of East Scarborough and Canterbury Road, and is directly to the north of Canterbury Elementary School and the grass park on which the school sits. The property has been vacant for over 7 years and is currently titled to Jean and Valerie Hawk, who took title in June of 2007. The property was cited by the City of University Heights several times since they took title, including 7 times for exterior violations and point of sale inspections. There have been no attempts made in the past to repair the conditions of the property. City of University Heights has paid for grass cutting year-round at this property for the past 7 years, including this year. The property is in derelict condition and has had a negative impact on the surrounding community. Upon my visit to the property on May 12th, with photos which were sent to council, I found the property to be open to entry, with the rear door of the property being kicked in, the window to the rear door being broken out, and the storage area in the back of the property being open to entry as well. The property is severely tax delinquent with a total balance of $49,621.43 owed in back taxes. There is currently an active tax foreclosure case against the property. That's case number CV 20-938-613, with a telephone hearing set for the case coming up this week on May 20th, 2021 at 1 p.m. Community members are upset at the condition of the property in its current state and have stated as such in conversations with me. One neighbor who lives directly next door to the property stated that she watches the property but has grown tired of having to live next to the property in its derelict condition. City Council previously found the property to be a nuisance with the declaration made in ordinance number 2019-76. Cuyahoga County Land Reutilization Corporation, or the County Land Bank, recently made the city aware of funds available for the demolition of nuisance properties specifically for suburban communities in the amount of $290,000. The deadline for applying for these funds is August 31st of this year. Title work in the tax foreclosure case was completed in April of 2020. Because it was completed back then, a call was made to the title company requesting that the title work be updated in preparation for the seeking of funds from the Cuyahoga County Land Bank for this property's demolition. And because of these issues and because it's across the street from a school, as such, I respectfully request that City Council grant a motion to allow me to begin seeking the funding for the demolition of the structure.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. Are there any questions for Mr. Engelbrecht?
Before I address Mr. Engelbrecht, is it my recollection that this was the property where the father and the family died, and the wife and kids were still there for a while, and then they moved out, and it has since just been languishing? I believe that was the case. I'm glad to see that this is finally being addressed, because it's been a couple of years.
This may be that one.
I
don't
think
know.
so.
Yeah. Was that the motorcycle accident?
I believe so, yeah.
That's very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that this is going to be remedied. Mr. Engelbrecht, it's nice to see your face. We've emailed, we've spoken. We're delighted to have you on board. Council's received a flurry of emails designating a number of properties in the city that are now have been languishing, have been dangerous, have been hazardous. And since you've arrived now, they've come to our attention and they're going to be remedied. So that's tremendous. It's concerning, but I think now we're headed in the right direction. So thank you very much. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
This is a good thing. This is a good thing. I hate to see any house come down, especially the homes that have been here for 80 years or in that neighborhood, and the character of them is so different from new ones that go up, but safety is paramount. So regretfully, this is probably the route we're going to have to take.
Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld. Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you. So again, I appreciate the pictures and the emails. Like what Mrs. Blankfeld said, that we don't ever want to have to tear a house down if we can save it. So the pictures that you sent are really only the outside. I only see like
Right.
one inside one with the it looks like the electrical or water gauges.
Mhm.
Did you have a chance to get the warrant to go into the house?
Not yet. I'm meeting with Prosecutor Stephanie Scalise this Friday at 1 o'clock to go over properties that will need search warrants. Even though the property was open to entry and was obviously vandalized, I didn't want to go inside without at least getting a search warrant first. So having said that, yeah, we're getting search warrants for 5 properties, which I'll be mentioning later.
So I'm just hesitant to pass this without actually going into it, because we've had great success with some houses with individuals who have bought the houses and rehabbed them. And like this has a brick facade. It could be that it's awful inside and torn up and not savable. And of course, I would do that. I'm not sure if this is premature before the actual warrant to go in.
I would have to agree. It was my understanding, if it was going to be suggested that it be demoed, that we already knew that the inside was completely beyond any remedy. Is there a sunset on when this funding would no longer be available to us to do this?
The
If it should need to
deadline,
be?
yeah, the deadline is August 31st.
August
I wanted to
31st.
bring this, again, this particular property to council's attention because council already in the past, in 2019, named this property a nuisance.
Right.
That was 2019-76 ORD. That's the only reason why I brought this property forward today, because the rest of the properties I haven't seen had interior inspections that were done or completed, at least when I looked inside the files. So I thought those were a bit premature to be bringing, even though I sent council pictures and photographs of the properties being open to entry, along with the various conditions of the outside of the properties. But that was the reason for this particular property. Was it was already deemed a nuisance by council 2 years ago, and we have the funding now. We have access to the funding now in order for it to come down.
When do you anticipate gaining entry with a warrant?
If I get the search warrant this Friday, all I have to do is schedule a meeting, or not a meeting, but a date with
A
the
visit.
police to go out to the property. So it could be next week.
Okay. I'd really like to see what the interior looks like. Because like Mrs. Weiss said, we've had it where there were properties where we thought they were beyond any saving, and they were rehabbed and they're wonderful. So
Yeah, Mr. McConville, just for clarification, today's motion is requesting permission to seek the funding. We'll still need to come back, I think, to actually do a demo.
Well, I think that's true if council reserves that right. I mean, the way the building demolition ordinance works, there are, I think, 4 separate categories in which a demo permit can be issued. And one is that the property's been declared a public nuisance. But if council wants to reserve that right yet, they can do that by motion today. And the fact of the matter, and we have discussed this administratively, is that we still have a notice process that we need to go through. So our next steps would include having the judicial title report updated and issued in the city's name so that we can make sure that proper notice is given to all interested parties, and then walking through a notice process with an opportunity to cure. When a property gets to the state it's in now, including its tax foreclosure status, that becomes extremely unlikely. But nevertheless, we're obligated to go through that notice process, and it would only be after we're satisfied that notice has been given and no efforts made to cure that we would administratively authorize the demolition. So if council wants to reserve the granting of the power to demolish and makes their approval for seeking funding contingent on that, that would be fine. And I think we would have enough time to get the ball rolling and have that administrative search warrant executed and conducted so that you can see, whether the home still has good bones or not.
right.
Yeah, I'd
I
like
think,
to.
oh, sorry, go ahead,
No.
Michelle.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Mr. Gould, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it sounds like there are a lot of steps that need to take place, and I appreciate kind of the background information on what still needs to happen between now and the time that we get the funding and the time that the property could be demolished. With all of those steps in mind, I think I'd like to allow Mr. Engelbrecht to continue his work. It sounds like he has the motivation to do it now, and there's a lot to do if you're going to get all of these steps done on the multiple properties. I mean, I can't imagine having to do just the warrants on the properties that have been sent to us by email. If we need to do all of these other judicial steps and administrative steps between now and getting the actual funding, I'd like to continue that process, but would reserve. And I think maybe Vice Mayor Weiss, is that the motion you were about to make?
Yeah, just with the that we can make sure that we approve the demolition. That's all.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so we have if I understand, then we have a motion by Mrs. Weiss to provide authority to seek the funding for the demolition of 3621 East Scarborough through the Cuyahoga County Land Reutilization Corporation, with the provision that the council reserves the final go-ahead on the demolition. I may have said that inartfully, but I think that's essentially.
I think that captures it, Mayor.
Okay, very good. And a second by Mr. Gould. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Ertl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht.
Thank you, Mayor.
Next is item E, motion to accept the bid as the lowest and best from ABC Equipment Rental and Sales of Brunswick Hills, Ohio, and authorize the purchase of 2 Kubota utility refuse collection vehicles in an amount not to exceed $16,987 each, for a total amount not to exceed $32,974. Mr. Picorni, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and good evening, Council. The bids were opened Friday, April 30th for these 2 Kubota refuse collection vehicles. And as the Mayor had indicated in the authorization, the low bidder was ABC Equipment Rental. We have purchased equipment from them before, and we have also purchased equipment from Menor MFG, which was the second low bidder. The city operates 6 of these vehicles. Currently, one of them is out of service due to a transmission problem. So the need for the purchase of these vehicles is getting more critical. I respectfully request that council authorize the purchase of these 2 vehicles so that we might get these as soon as possible. I've been told by the low bidder, ABC Equipment Rental, that the wait on these vehicles could be up to 120 days. And we've already asked them to start looking into scheduling the purchase of these. So I respectfully request we authorize purchase of these from ABC Equipment Rental.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni on this item? And if not, is there a motion to accept the bid?
Mayor, I'll make the motion to accept the bid in the amount not to exceed $16,987 for each. That's for 2 Kubotas, and for a sum not to exceed $32,974.
Okay, very good. We have a motion by Mr. Rock. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Yeah, very good. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Next is item F, motion authorizing advertising for bids for Service Department temporary labor staffing for 2021 through 2023. Mr. Picorni, you have the floor again.
Thank you again. This is for temporary staffing that the Service Department uses during leaf collection, brush collection in the fall, heavy periods. We also use the temporary staffing during periods of emergency should we have a storm and we need additional staffing to help clean up from something like that. In the previous years, we've had a 3-year contract with Minutemen Staffing for this service, and that has worked out well. But we're requesting authorization to go out for bids, again, for temporary staffing for emergencies in fall, leaf, and brush collection.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? And if not, is there a motion?
Mr. Picorni, how does this interact with the union that we have? What opportunities are given to the workers that we have currently before moving on to the temporary staffing?
It is spelled out in our collective bargaining agreement to allow for temporary staffing. And we've negotiated several things to allow that to happen.
So this is simply within the current constructs that have been negotiated between the union and the city?
That is correct. During the last 2 negotiating sessions, this item was discussed at length.
Great, thanks so much.
Yeah, if I could elaborate, I think historically we have, the CBA has allowed, I think it's 10 weeks during leaf season to have 4 temporary workers assist assist the service department. That's during leaf season. With a group by agreement with the union, that can be extended, but that requires union consent. And then Mr. Picorni also mentioned storms. If we do have a severe storm, such that we need the extra people here because we got to clean up, and this does not happen. I don't know if that we've done this since I've been here, Jeff, but
No, it has not happened since you've been around, but it has happened in the past.
yes, we've had some severe storms, but we haven't had, like when we had those microbursts and they hit Shaker especially, and they hit Pepper Pike and they hit Cleveland Heights, but somehow we escaped that. If we would have had those kinds of branches come down, then that would have been an instance where we would have availed ourselves here. And the CBA does allow in those emergent situations to then call in the temps for those reasons. So, Mr. Gould, I hope that elaborates what you were seeking.
Thanks so much for clarifying that. I'm glad to hear we haven't had to go that route, but I'm grateful that it's negotiated that we could.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Picorni, can you just confirm that any members from Minutemen will not enter the backyards as part of our rubbish pickup?
I don't know that has been a requirement of our collective bargaining agreement. We have done background checks on the people. We are allowed by the collective bargaining agreement to use them for rubbish collection if we have to. So I can't say that we would never allow them to enter a backyard.
Okay, but there are background checks then?
Yes, there are.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I'll move to approve that we go to bid for the services of temporary staffing as outlined.
Yeah, very good. Motion by Mr. Gould. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Erdl. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Next is item G, motion to authorize the police department to accept grant monies from the Bureau of Justice Assistance in the amount of $4,536 to offset the cost of purchasing 9 bulletproof vests with the cost of $5,256. Chief Rogers, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, this item is related to a recurring grant that the police department applies for. Specifically on October 19th, 2020, the police department was awarded $4,536 by the Bureau of Justice Assistance as a result of the department's application through the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Program. This grant provides 50% reimbursement of the cost related to the agency purchasing vests for officers. We are due for 9 officers to have vests replaced this year in 2021. And this $4,500 figure that has been awarded to us can be utilized by the department through August 31st of 2022 for related purchasing. A little background on the grant. The Bulletproof Vest Partnership has awarded more than 13,000 jurisdictions, a total of $522 million in federal funds for the purchase of over 1.4 million vests as of November 2020 for law enforcement.
Okay, we'll wait one moment.
Apologize, my computer is about to shut off because it wasn't plugged in. So with that being said, there's been also other estimates that have acknowledged that over 3,000 police officers' lives have been saved since 1990 as a result of wearing bulletproof vests in the field while being shot. So with that being said, it would be my recommendation that the agency continues to accept this type of grant award so that we can ensure that we have bulletproof vests that recognize industry standards on a replacement schedule that keeps our officers safe and effective in the field. And I respectfully request legislative approval and authorization to accept the aforementioned award and to be used in the mentioned manner. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief?
Chief,
Mrs.
couple
Blank?
of things. First of all, as always, I know that we are always grateful that you and Chief Perko as well always are on the hunt and secure grant monies for all sorts of things that are essential to the work that you do. I'm grateful, especially for something like this. Hopefully, it will never have to be used. But I wondered, first of all, so out of pocket on our end will only be $720. Am I doing the math right?
So this grant is utilized to reimburse 50% of the total cost for each vest that's purchased.
Right. I saw a total cost of $52.56 and the grant monies are $45.36. So
Correct. So the total cost for 2021 vest replacements for 9 vests will be approximately $5,100.
okay.
So the grant will reimburse 50% of that total cost after
Okay.
we purchase the vests.
Still
And then
tremendous.
and again, we can use the remaining balance in 2022 as well.
Even better. I was interested, there are things that you learn. I never knew, for example, that the smoke detectors have expiration dates and so industry standards, how often do they change? I think it's interesting that something that always, I don't know, to the untrained seems like a basic. I'm interested to learn how often the standards change for these items.
So throughout my career, the standard has been every 5 years or within 5 years for the vest to be replaced for an officer.
Okay. Good to know. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld. Are there any other questions or comments? And if not, is there a motion?
Also move, Mayor.
Very good. Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld to authorize the police department to accept grant monies from the Bureau of Justice Assistance in the amount of $4,536 to offset the cost of purchasing 9 bulletproof vests with the cost of $5,256. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Ertl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Chief Rogers.
Thank you.
Next is item H, motion to hold an executive session immediately following this regular meeting for the purpose of discussing personnel, legal, and/or real estate matters. The administration is aware of 2 matters of potential and/or imminent litigation that Mr. McConville would like to update us on. So I would ask for a motion for an executive session following the regular portion of this meeting for that update.
Also move, Mayor.
Very good. The motion by Mr. Blankfeld. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Gould. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Ertl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. We will hold that at the end of the regular portion of the meeting. We turn now to directors' reports, starting with finance. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. I did send to council a series of reports that summarize all the activity of the city through April 30th. And then just yesterday, I believe, sent out a write-up that highlighted some of that information. I'd just like to run through that. I'm not going to read every sentence in here. Just wanted to make sure you're aware of some of the high points here and some things to consider. Income taxes through April 30th are on target with what we originally projected for that first 4-month period. So that's a good note. We're a little bit under on our property tax collections. I got to get some more detail on that. That could be because of delinquencies. I'm not sure. But we did get the credits from the state for owner occupied, non-business and homestead reductions, those came in higher than our projections. The total general fund revenue through April is about 2% higher than the original estimate for that period, so that's good. Special assessments were received in April, with the exception of the sewer operating, which was down under the projection by a little less than $20,000. Everything else is either on pace or running slightly ahead. A couple points in here, both on the revenue and expense side. We have $265,000 that we have budgeted to pay police and fire pension costs. If you remember, we changed the millage to dedicate a little bit more to the pension funds this year. And once we write off some of the pension expense from the general fund, we'll be able to reduce that general fund overall expense by $265,000. So I plan on doing a partial in June and another final adjustment in December of this year. We also, if you remember, adjusted the amount of revenue going into the debt service fund because there was a considerable surplus. So we're within roughly 2% of the original estimate for the year. We will have sufficient monies in there to pay our two debt obligations. Those come up in June and November. We did move that $100,000 into the new capital facilities improvement fund. And on an overall basis, we're about 2.5% over the original estimate for revenue for the first 4 months of the year. For expenses, we recorded $4.4 million through April for the general fund. We have $11 million and some change is unexpended at April 30th. For all funds, the total expense through April 30th is $4.87 million. And the unexpended appropriation balance is $14.9 million at the end of April. I highlighted some of the individual departments there. Council did approve a adjustment to the building department budget last month that moved the money out of payroll since we're not going to be paying anybody for any direct employment services here. So we moved those money to the other half of their budget to pay for the contract expenses for Safe Build. And the building department has a balance of $245,996 for the remaining, that should be 67% of 2021. Everything else is pretty much on target. We'll see how things go with the pool. Will be interesting since the original projections, both for revenue and expenses, were done when we had the full-blown pandemic restrictions. So we'll keep our eye on that, reports back to everybody. We will also schedule in June a transfer of $195,000 to the capital fund. That was part of the original plan for the 2021 budget. For the other funds, we're looking okay. The only one that I have general concern about would be the street lighting fund. I don't think that the assessment is sufficient to pay the costs right now, street lights. So we may wish to consider increasing that charge either this year or next year to ensure that the annual collection that we receive are sufficient to pay the lighting bills. We'll have enough money this year because we started out with a small beginning balance and we have a couple of real small transfers budgeted to that fund. So we should be okay. The TIF collections came in March, and we just cut checks today to pay our obligations to both the school district and to the bondholders. We'll have, as I said earlier, sufficient cash balance to pay all our bond payments. And for the capital improvement fund activity, we had projected expenses $804,000 in 2021. We've expended $158,756. I'll probably bring you back a budget adjustment because that financing option that was approved will lower the cash outlay this year, so we can lower our capital improvement fund budget for the rest of the year. As far as the statement of cash position, the unexpended fund balance at April 30th for the general funds, $5.8 million. It was $5.88 million in March. So the fund balance only decreased by $32,000 in April. For all funds in the general fund for all funds, it was $10.4 million at the end of April. The overall balance only decreased by $14,000 during the month of April. And if you remember too, on the how the property tax allocation went this year, we did fund more money in the general fund. At April 30th, we had $7.18 million on deposit with Fifth Third Securities. We've added $225,000 in deposits to the investment portfolio through April 30th. That included $75,000 that was added in April. We have since already added another 75 in May. So I gave everybody there a breakdown of what the investments are comprised of, and then gave you a summary there of what the RETA collections are. This will be a big month for RETA because the extension went through May 17th. So we should get the bulk of our collections in the next 2 weeks. And last year that deadline was extended through August, the middle of August. So we're having a little difference in terms of lining up monthly comparisons, but I'll be interested in what reports council what we get in the next 2 weeks. Also, since there's only 2 meetings scheduled in June, I'll have for the next meeting a prospective tax budget for next year. That has to be approved by council and filed with the county budget commission prior to July 15th. So if we can get 2 readings in June, I can get that down at the end of the month in June and take care of that. And that is about it. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any questions for Mr. Kennedy? All right, seeing none. Thank you. Thank you. Director of Law, Mr. McConville.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to take the opportunity to address a procedural and parliamentary matter that relates specifically to the removal of ordinance 2021-16 from this evening's agenda, which occurred pursuant to the direction of the mayor and in connection with the memorandum provided to council members. That ordinance 2021-16 related to the adoption of the Employee Policies and Procedures Manual. A couple members of council raised questions about the authority of both the mayor and council, and specific questions relating to who can remove items from the agenda and when is it appropriate to do so. But I think it makes sense to clarify that neither the mayor nor any other party has the authority to remove any legislative item from the agenda unilaterally. And no other party, including council, has the authority to remove a legislative item from the agenda outside of a public meeting. During the course of a meeting, council has the authority to add items to the agenda. And as it relates specifically to any item of legislation, council can, during the course of a meeting, remove an item, refer it to committee, adopt, table, or fail or deny approval of any particular item of legislation. I will have much more to report on during our executive session, and with that, I will turn the floor over to council members for any questions or clarifications.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. McConville?
So, Mr. McConville, do I understand then that the ordinance is properly on the agenda for second reading at the next session?
Yes, so that request has been made, and council should anticipate that ordinance 2021-16 will be on the agenda for the first meeting in June for its second reading, correct?
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, very good. Any further questions for Mr. McConville? Thank you. We turn now to Public Safety, Police, Chief Rogers.
Mayor, no report this evening.
Thank you. Public Safety, Fire, Chief Burko.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. One important item to report this evening. A couple weeks ago, we started pushing out on social media our partnership with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health and the Western Reserve Area Agency on Aging. And this is to facilitate a new program to vaccinate those that are homebound in the community. The Cuyahoga County Fire Chiefs have been taking the lead with the Board of Health all throughout the pandemic, including with the vaccinations in the county. And this program is meant to reach people who cannot leave their homes and go out and get the vaccine. The way this partnership is going to work is we have a contact number on a flyer that we've been pushing out that will encourage everyone to share with anyone that you know that's been trying to get a vaccine and cannot. That referral will be made through that number, and they'll be scheduled through the Western Reserve Agency in collaboration with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. Then the Board of Health will be working with the area fire departments to work on grouping individuals for scheduling for firefighter paramedics in the region to go into the homes and vaccinate them at their homes. Follow up with watching them after, make sure there's no side effects, and documenting all the paperwork. The Heights area was the pilot program for this that started a few weeks back. Shaker Heights was the first department to try to get it going. We partnered up with them with the other Heights area departments. And tomorrow at our station, we'll be hosting the first rollout of this in our community. So we'll have firefighter paramedics from Shaker Heights, Cleveland Heights, South Euclid, East Cleveland, as well as ourselves. And then a Cuyahoga County Board of Health nurse. The nurse will be bringing the vaccines to our station. We'll get a list of the individuals in those regions that need it, and then we'll set out to provide the vaccinations. So our flyer is up on our social media. I'll also read the phone number out here for the record for the Western Reserve Agency for the referral. And that number is 216-621-0303. And again, if you have anyone that you know in the area that might need it, definitely reach out to them or reach out to us, and we'll make sure they get taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Burko. Any questions for Chief Burko?
No, I just want to applaud our department being part of such an effort. It's the ultimate kindness to help get those that can't get to where they need to get this life-saving vaccine. It's tremendous. It's tremendous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld. Next is service, Mr. Picorni.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, thank you, Council. Only two items to report on this evening. Spring cleanup of brush and loose leaves have been completed. So the public needs to be aware that for the future, brush must be cut in 4-foot lengths and tied in order to be collected, and yard waste must be bagged. Second item is the service department staff has been working on Purvis Pool. We're opening that May 31st, Memorial Day. Information is available online at universityheights.com or in the brochure, which was distributed to residents, the Mosaic magazine. I wanted to make sure that people knew that that was the location to look for information and sign up for pool times. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? All right, seeing none, we will move on to building. Mr. White. Mr. White, do you have a report this evening? Well, we can try back later with Mr. White, and we will move on then to housing and community development. Mr. Engelbrecht, do you have a report?
I do, Mayor. Thank you. Our department within the last 2 weeks, since May 3rd through May 14th, has received and returned 222 voicemails and phone calls, sent 217 emails, processed point of sale inspections in the amount of 20, processed rental permanent applications in the amount of 3. Contractor registrations processed within the last 2 weeks were 18. Certificate of transfers issued were 10. Certificate of compliance issued were 6. Special garbage pickups processed were 20. And properties that were added to the city's year-long grass cut list were 20. Change in the housing department. Inspectors will begin as of next week, their day at 7:00 a.m. in the morning. Reason for that is it gives people the chance to have their inspections done starting at 7:30. A lot of people go to work at 9 o'clock or need to be at work by 9 o'clock. So it gives people the opportunity to have their inspections done before they need to go to work. First inspections again, starting next week, will begin at 7:30. Mondays, as of right now, for at least the next month and a half, maybe, are dedicated completely to serving grass cutting tickets by the inspectors that are out and about in the community. So they will be dedicating their time on Mondays, their entire day, to getting the grass cutting tickets out. By Thursday, they'll be back out at the properties to check and make sure that the grass has been cut. If the grass hasn't been cut by Thursday, on that Friday, that list will be sent over to the service department for the grass to be cut. We have a pre-construction meeting scheduled this Friday for 3509 Raymont with Knez Builders. Council has the link. I believe I forwarded it out to council previously. We also notified 20 residents around the house, 5 on one side, 5 on the other side, and then 10 across the street from where the house will be located, about the meeting in writing. So they have notice as well. And I believe the link is on our city's website. And again, search warrants. I have a meeting with Steph Scalise this Friday at 1 o'clock in regards to a few properties, one being 3673 Washington Boulevard. The second being 3919 Faversham. The third being 3485 Tullamore. The fourth being 2215 Brockway, which is among the worst in the city. I had a fifth that was actually supposed to be scheduled at 3708 Meadowbrook, but I actually received contact from the owner's attorney, and we will be scheduling interior inspection for that property during the month of June instead of getting a search warrant. The city has cut 27 lawns. And the department will begin aggressively pushing cases involving vacant and abandoned properties to the court. Again, the reason for that is because there's no reason why a property should be open and vacant, open to entry in this city. The last thing about that, in regards to the vacant properties that are open and vacant, I've worked with Luke in regards to crafting a letter which will be mailed to the owners of properties along with posted on the door, the front door of the property, to any property that's open to entry. So the owners will receive notice. We're giving them 3 days to address the issue. In regards to securing the property, if the property is not secured within 3 days, we will move to have the property secured ourselves and charge the owners for it along with interest. That's all I have at this point.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Engelbrecht?
Mr. Engelbrecht, just a kind of a question of collaboration. I know sometimes there are areas out there that maybe we don't hit for the city as fast as our residents would like, city-owned lots and areas that need grass. Is there when your guys are out there looking at homes, if they see a pocket park or an end of the road area that needs some attention, do you communicate that to the service department?
The service department receives a list which is cross-checked before the contractor goes out to well, not the contractor, but the city goes out to cut the grass. So yeah, we check before we go out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Any further questions for Mr. Engelbrecht? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Engelbrecht. We'll circle back now. I think Mr. White's with us. Mr. White, do you have a report for building department?
Thank you, Mayor. No report from building.
Okay, very good. Very good. Then we will now move on to the city engineer. Mr. Cooney, do you have a report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Council, this 2021 road program started yesterday. It's our resurfacing program. We started actually on Washington Boulevard over by John Carroll, the athletic fields. We had that road down to one lane because of a severe water main break that happened a couple weeks ago. We took care of that patch first, and then they moved on to the regular streets and the street program. So there'll be, it's a 45-day job. So they're going to just move around town systematically and get that done. The Dominion project in the northwest corner of the town is progressing on schedule. As far as I believe most of the main line is in, and they're working on a lot of the services now. Finally, the facilities plan that we're working on, GPD, we did our building assessment walkthroughs. We've completed that, and we have several interviews scheduled, mainly tomorrow and next Monday, with the directors, and to get their input on the facilities plan that we're working on. So, end of report, Mayor.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Any questions for Mr. Cheney? All right, seeing none. We will now move to communications and civic engagement. Mr. Cook.
Good evening, everyone. I'll keep it to two items this evening. First is working closely with Chief Perko on this program to get vaccines to folks that are homebound. We've had the initial kickoff, and we're going to keep hammering away at it at different sources. I think the most useful one will be our At Your Service newsletter, which is mailed, as you recall, to senior citizens in University Heights. So that's, almost as good as a direct mail piece. So I'm hoping that every senior in town will know about it. We're going to hit it in other sources, earned media, social media, and hopefully that will help supplement the excellent work that Chief Perko and his department and our partners with the Western Reserve are doing. So yeah, it's a great program, and happy to play a small part in its success. Secondly, if we have any parents of very young children watching council tonight, want to remind you of an event coming up Monday, sponsored by our friends at the Heights Library. It is Cooper's second birthday party. So Cooper will be there. Young kids, there'll be story time, and yeah, thanks for the Heights Library for putting this all together for us. That's it.
There's a spring chicken joke in here somewhere, but we can't find it. Thank you, Mr. Cook. All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Cook? All right. Moving along, economic development, Mrs. Drucker.
Yes, just to report to council on Friday, May 14th, Kelly and I were present for the bid opening of the RFPs for the comprehensive zoning code update. We did have 4 companies bid. An email was sent out to the Economic Development Committee, and I did copy CC all of council. So we will need to either get an Economic Development Committee scheduled to decide what interviews to do, or just go ahead and schedule an interview date and choose which bids, which RFPs you would like to interview, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or all 4. So, but I just need to respond to the companies. If you're choosing not to interview somebody, out of professional courtesy, I'd like to let those companies know as soon as possible. In addition, if you are interviewing someone, I'd obviously like to give those companies as much heads up as possible. And that's all I have to report tonight.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Drucker. Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Drucker?
No, but I'll just say, I'll touch base with you, Ms. Drucker, tomorrow about what we plan to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drucker. All right, we will now move to reports from standing committees, building and housing. Mrs. Blankfeld. You are muted.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Community outreach, Mrs. Party. Mrs. Party's not here, but is there anybody from the Community Outreach Committee who has a report? Seeing none, we'll go with no report. Economic development, Mr. Rock.
Yes, Mayor. There may or may not be a meeting, depending on what we come up with for the RFP process, but there will be an interview process, and I believe that's going to go through the committee, right, Ms. Drucker, or is that more administrative? Who's going to chair that? We'll be part of the interview
Yeah,
process.
right. The initial was for, when I first introduced this, was to have an internal administrative interview committee with you included on that.
Okay.
In the Economic Development Committee meetings, it was brought up that you would want others involved in a larger committee. Now, whether that's the committee that audits the process as it goes along, which that would be conducive to what we wrote in the RFP, and then just leave the interviewing. We could leave the interviewing to administrative, and then administration could bring a recommendation to council. It's really whatever the committee decides to do.
Okay. I'll talk with members.
But we could talk about that in more detail tomorrow.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay,
So no further report beyond that.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Rock. Finance, Mrs. Weiss.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have a Finance and Finance Advisory Committee meeting on Tuesday, the 25th at 7:30 p.m.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Recreation, Mr. Erdl.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Erdl. Safety, Mrs. Berry.
We were to have a citizen advisory committee on Tuesday, the 25th. We in the future had met a little earlier in the evening, but it looks like the email that went out says that the meeting starts at 7, which seems like it's going to conflict with the finance committee. So what do you want? How do you want to handle that?
Well, the 25th at 7 p.m. was the meeting date and time that the Citizens Committee requested at their last meeting. My inclination is to honor the Citizen Committee's request to hold the meeting at the date and time they requested.
So, Sandra, when we originally talked, you said 6:30 p.m. was the meeting. That's why I made it 7:30. So we could just move the Finance Committee to 8, and then you have your full hour.
Okay, thank you.
Very good.
I guess that's my mistake.
Well, we usually start that meeting earlier, but it was 7 p.m. as agreed by the committee members at the last meeting.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Mrs. Berry? All right. Okay, service and utilities, Mr. Gould.
Thank you, Mayor. Our survey extraordinaire, Dr. Tom Sutton, has completed the synthesis of the survey questions that were posed by the different parties after our last service committee meeting, and has put that together in a draft. As it stands right now, with some of the questions, the survey runs on to 3 pages. So I've asked Kelly to set a meeting for us. Looks like Wednesday of next week works best, but we'll see if there are some schedules, some individuals who wanted to attend that we're going to see if they were able to open up their schedules, and then we'll officially notice that. The purpose of that meeting, Mayor, will be simply to kind of go over the questions, see what, if anything, we can decide as a group should be cut out to still bring about the same effect, and then get that out into citizen hands as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. Does that conclude your report, Mr. Gould?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good, thanks. Committee of the Whole, Vice Mayor Weiss.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, no report, thank you. Okay, this concludes the regular portion of this evening's meeting. We do have an executive session to enter. I will tell the members of the public that you are welcome to stay here on the Zoom call while we are in the executive session in a breakout room. I do not anticipate any business that will be conducted on the record after the executive session other than a motion to adjourn. You are nevertheless welcome to stay. Our next meeting will be in June. I, of course, don't have my calendar right in front of me. That would be Monday, June 7th. So we will be back then. If we do not see you when we come back from executive session, have a good evening, good rest of your month. And we will now, Kelly, if you could give me the controls, I will set up the executive session. I am now the host. I will set up the breakout. Oh, that's right. Mrs. Purdy's not here. That's why I had a short note. Okay. I'm now opening the room. Thank you. Is there a motion to return to regular session?
I'll make the motion, Mayor, to return to session. Thank you.
Very good. Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, I'll take the second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Yeah, very good. We are back in regular session. Is there a motion?
I'll make a
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll second.
Motion adjourned by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Yeah, very good. We are adjourned. We'll be back on June 7th. Thank you.
Be well, everyone.
Safe. Don't forget to
Bye,
give us
everyone.
Memorial Day.